Su King's autobiographical novel 10 Years of Marriage Chapter 19. Taking refuge in the country, Sidith baby was crying, and the 5-year-old Kyuker opened her eyes wide. Everyone else was in a bad mood, as if a disaster had come, and they were all gloomy. Mother Lin missed her home in the countryside and insisted on going back. We couldn't keep her. Mother Huang said that her mother-in-law couldn't do it anymore in the first half of this year, so her daughter came up to take her back. The family had a new child mother, with thick eyebrows and triangular eyes, and a particularly large body. She held Kyuko in her left hand and held a cup of strong tea in her right hand for me. She spoke very well, but looked fierce. Xian said, "I was so anxious that day that I telegraphed you as soon as I arrived in Hangzhou. And then I telegraphed you again after I got home. I planned to go back to Shanghai in a few days, but I didn't expect you to come here." I couldn't help but sneer and said, "I really came to the wrong place and let you down." Xian hesitated for a while and explained, "I didn't say you came to the wrong place. I said that if you hadn't come, I would have gone back to Shanghai. I wonder if you received my telegram?" I couldn't help but snort and said, "Maybe the telegram is thinking the same thing as you. Stay at home for a few more days to pick up a yellow. We will leave on an auspicious day." My father-in-law couldn't help but sigh. "What time is it now? You two are still arguing in vain? I think we may not be able to keep in city soon. With a child at home, it will be difficult to escape in times of crisis." Xingying returned home a few days ago. I have urged her to go back quickly. "I think Huiking doesn't need to take risks with us. It's better to stay with your mother for a while. She has moved to Fengtai half a month ago. That place is safe. I thought you had a good plan." The daughter urged her to go back to her husband's house, and the daughter-in-law urged her to go back to her parents' house. That would be too much. So I pretended not to understand and said seriously, "Father-in-law, what are you talking about? You two old people are here. How can I leave first? A woman should follow her husband after marriage. Don't worry, I'm not afraid of anything." He didn't say anything. The next day, someone said that the airport in Latutan was bombed, so they were scared out of their wits again. My mother-in-law and father-in-law discussed it and said, "I think it's better to do this. Lujian has been relatively peaceful recently. Auding and the others are all together. Why don't we move half of our things there and let Xian live with Waking and the little girl first? If we encounter an emergency, we can also bring Kyuko with us." I had nothing to say and went down 3 days later. That was the 21st day after giving birth. The Lu family has quite a few houses. They live in the left house and let us use the right house. We hired a maid in the countryside. She is very honest, but she can't cook small dishes. My little daughter didn't have enough milk. I insisted that Xian go to the city to buy milk powder. Mrs. Lu said that it was not necessary. We just need to find a milk helper in the village. The problem was solved in this way. When people live in the countryside, life becomes dull and boring. They just yawn when they wake up in the morning. I said to Xian, after the full moon, "I'll go outside with you to see the scenery." Xian smiled bitterly and replied, "A muddy field and a few ragged farmers. Unless you are a proletarian, I'm not interested. In fact, I'm not a proletarian. I just want to keep some romantic flavor." However, the romantic flavor was shattered when it encountered reality. I stood by the stream and saw a few barefoot country folks coming over. I only suspected that they were not good people, so I couldn't help but feel uneasy about my diamond ring, cheongsam and high-heeled leather shoes. A man and a woman may talk sweetly in the park or any other scenic spot, but in the countryside in autumn, it is lonely and no longer interested. Besides, most people in the countryside are surprised by what they see. When they saw Xian and I walking back and forth and talking and laughing, they all gathered round to look, and even the big yellow dog barked inexplicably. We couldn't go out, so we had to sit at home. In the morning, we planned to buy snacks. Xian drank some wine, took a nap after lunch, and went to bed after dinner. He would hug his little daughter when he had nothing to do. I couldn't help but secretly feel sorry for him when I saw him with such a strong and tall figure, sucking on slippers and hugging his little daughter all day. Mrs. Lu looked at Xian like a baby, sometimes sending him snacks to eat, and sometimes asking him to read the Gao Wang Jing. Auding made a fishing rod by himself and went fishing alone when he was bored. Sometimes he would drag Xian to go with him. The two of them fished for half a day but didn't catch 4 or 5 small fish. When they came back, They either complained about me or boasted about their own skills. Apart from that, they didn't seem to have any other experience. After more than half a month, Xian told me that he wanted to go to the city. I asked him what he was going for, and he said he was going to see his parents. I guessed that he was going because he had run out of money and had to go back home to get more. 3 days later, he came back and told me hesitantly that he wanted to go back to Shanghai. Isn't there a war in Shanghai? I asked casually, but his answer was serious. He said, the middle school where I taught last semester has now moved to the concession to resume classes. Recently, I received a notice that my salary has also increased. Men should be independent. Can I rely on my parents until I grow old? I thought about it and asked again. What about me and the children? His lips moved for a while and he said, there is no way. Let's stay here for a while. First, it's too dangerous to go out. And second, I'm afraid the money is not enough. I couldn't help but feel sad, knowing that the separation of life and death would begin again. On the night when Jixian decided to leave, he still had 500 yuan with him. He only kept more than 100 yuan for himself and gave me all the 400 yuan in silver. I took the heavy stack of things, tears fell, and said to him, when can we meet again? If the money is used up, who will ask for it? He said, Father will always give it to you. As long as you work hard, you will never starve. I said, I would rather take the risk and live in the city so that I can have a bowl of ready-made food. If I stay here and they don't send money when it runs out, I will be worried to death if I don't starve to death. So Xian pondered for a while and decided to take me and my little daughter to the city, leaving everything here so that we can go back to the countryside in case of emergency. My parents-in-law didn't say anything else when they saw me. They just said that your mother in the countryside had heard the news of your return and sent people to ask about it several times. We told her that everyone was safe and now living in Lujian. So I wrote another letter to report the news that my mother was back in the city. Xian left on a cold morning. My little daughter was still asleep. I quietly sent him out the door. His expression was very bleak, but he was not afraid. When he was about to get on the car, he said to me, stay here for a while. I will come to pick you up when I have a way to make a living. Don't worry about me. I am not afraid of death, but I am afraid of not being able to stand on my own. I nodded, and my heart seemed to be brave. I said, please rest assured. I will definitely be able to protect myself and my little daughter, and I will just wait for you to pick us up. So we forced ourselves to smile and laughed. After my parents-in-law passed away, they took care of me in every way, but my little daughter could not eat milk, and she was always hungry and crying. It has been more than 3 months. One day, I was changing her diaper in the living room, and I accidentally touched her itchy place, and she shrank and giggled. I was so excited that I had no one to tell, so I called Chaku to come over and said, Chaku, come and listen to my little sister Jeej. She's so smart. She's only 3 months old. Before I finished speaking, I heard an alarm and my father-in-law rushed in a panic and said, stop joking. Stop it. At this point, the emergency alarm went off again. The rumbling sound of airplanes came from the roof. I put my little daughter in the cradle and ran to the courtyard to watch. There were 12 of them. When they flew low, the emblems were clear and you could even pick them down with a bamboo pole. Just as I was thinking, I heard a sound of the sky collapsing and the earth cracking. The glass windows were all jumping, and strings of dust fell from the ceiling. My legs were as soft as cotton and I walked into the living room step by step. My little daughter was already asleep in the cradle, curled up in her grandmother's arms. My father-in-law held his gray head with both hands and sighed. I didn't expect that I would die in my 50s. Xian is far away in Shanghai. Alas, both of us are granddaughters. I felt sad in my heart. I didn't blame him for favoring boys over girls. I was just very anxious, as if I would die in a moment. Then a few more bombs were dropped. The plane only hovered on the roof. When I heard the sound of it approaching, I even stopped breathing. I only breathed when it flew a little further away. This continued for 30 or 40 minutes before I could no longer hear the sound of the plane. It was so refreshing. After a long time, the alarm was lifted. That night, my mother sent someone to visit us. She had heard about the bombing in the city, so she asked our whole family to go to Fengbai to take shelter. My parents-in-law also thought it was better to go there. I later learned that the reason was to reduce their responsibility for me and the children. With your family watching, they would not let others talk about it even if they were killed in the bombing. That night, we packed a lot of valuables, but we put them in and took them out again. We felt reluctant to leave them, but it was not good to take too much. The next morning, we got off the boat before dawn, fearing that the plane would come again. The black boat asked for 10 yuan, which was unheard of. We waited for half an hour when we passed the city gate, but it was useless to be anxious. There were many boats of all sizes fleeing, and the boatmen were shouting songs angrily. My mother was sad and happy to see me, so she tried her best to arrange for my parents-in-law. Fish and meat could not be bought in the market, but eggs were ready, and there were many vegetables. In addition, there were adult fish, so we could just let it go. My parents-in-law were very uneasy and said they were going to find a house in the village so that she could help take care of the children. My mother naturally agreed with great joy. A house was found on the same day. The valuables, bed, table, etc., were all borrowed. After living there for 3 or 5 days, I heard that the planes had not come again. My parents-in-law were worried about the things in the city, so they left me and my 2 daughters and Tongmei and Fengxiang and went to the city themselves. Fengwei is full of green mountains. According to the villagers, when the planes come, they can go to the caves to drill. The fields are also neat, with a large area in front of the door, all green and lush. Sometimes the planes pass slowly, but they don't drop bombs, and there is no alarm to tell you to hide and flee. However, there are some villagers who are particularly timid, such as Uncle Sangwan, who was walking by the field once and saw a plane coming from afar. He was afraid that he would not be able to escape in time, so he jumped into the paddy field and squatted down, dug a piece of mud to smear his face, and pulled some green grass to spread on his head to avoid being seen by the pilot. Although the pilot didn't see it, the woman named Mao was frightened. She was changing clothes and heard the sound of the plane passing over the roof. She ran out and fled to the fields. Her big breasts were shaking. When she saw him, she thought it was a ghost and screamed in fear. He also explained tremblingly and asked her whether the plane dropped bombs. She said she seemed to hear it, but she learned that it didn't. The person who told them the news was serious at first, but later saw that they were in such a state. She couldn't help but laugh frivolously. Every day I took Gunzong and my little daughter to my mother's house. My mother found a nurse for me. She was also afraid of planes. When they passed by, she would ask me to hide under the 8 immortal table. I felt embarrassed at first, but later I reluctantly agreed. However, Kyuka couldn't hide well and would jump out in a moment. I saw her coming out and followed her out. When my mother saw me coming out, she didn't want to hide anymore. For the sake of her children, she could often reduce any fear. Later, we lived there calmly. At night, Kyuka slept with Tongma. One time, I heard her shouting in her sleep that she wanted to pee. Tongma muttered something about short-lived peeing. As she spoke, she put her down on the bed and told her to sit on the spittoon to pee. After she finished peeing, she called for bed. Tongma stretched out her hand and pulled her up, mumbling something in her mouth. She never got out of bed to support herself. I secretly watched her and felt very dissatisfied. I wanted to say a few words to her, but then I thought that she was usually very popular with her mother-in-law, so I should say less and save some trouble. So after 2 nights, I called Kyuka to sleep behind my feet under some excuse. In the middle of the night, I patted this one and covered that one with a quilt to scratch her. After a while, she fell ill. I had a sore throat, and the only way to treat it in the countryside was to go to the doctor, but I had to listen to him. My mother brought me some thin porridge every day, and she took care of my little daughter, and I had to give the sugar to Tama again. Tongma took her out in the wild every day and didn't wait on me at home. My mother was very angry, but she couldn't say anything, so she had to come and take care of her herself. At night, I couldn't bother my mother anymore, so I said I had already helped and asked her to go back and let me sleep. But before I could sleep for a moment, my little daughter started crying and making a fuss. She was sick and had no milk, and Tongmei ignored me when she called me. So I had to get out of bed slowly and use a small pot to cook milk cakes. There were no electric stoves in the countryside, so it was very inconvenient to make a fire. I couldn't light a fire with a thin piece of firewood, so I had to pour some kerosene from the American military lamp on it. As a result, the milk cakes were not fully cooked, and the lamp ran out of oil and the fire went out. I had to grope in the dark and pick them up with my fingers to feed the baby. Later, I heard that Changma often bullied Chaku outside. When the child played and did something that was not to her liking, she would pick up Chaku and pretend to throw him into the river. Chaku was so scared that she cried and begged for mercy and said she would not dare to do it again. Only then did she scold him again and again. Sometimes my father-in-law was happy to pick a grass to blow a trumpet, and he would carry it to Dama to report whether Chaku was good and could blow the trumpet. Tangma raised her thick eyebrows and stared at her with triangular eyes, saying, "What good are you? The little girl is sitting here and picking wild grass." Soon my illness gradually recovered, but my appearance became thinner. At that time, the Shanghai army had withdrawn, and it was said that the market was very peaceful. Xian wrote to say that he was going to be a lawyer next year. Once, my mother whispered to me, "I think you should take your little daughter back to Shanghai. I hope Xian can make more money and Chaku can come and go." I thought it was unreasonable to live in the countryside all the time, so I went to the city to tell my parents-in-law about my opinion. My parents-in-law thought about it overnight, and the next day my father-in-law came to me and said, "You can live in Shanghai, but it's inconvenient to take your little daughter with you. If there is any change, won't Changshan be tied up?" I said, "Then what can I do?" Then my mother-in-law said, "I think you should leave her in the countryside and find someone to take care of her. When she is weaned, you can take her back. Then the world will be peaceful." My head dropped, tears welled up, but I opened my eyes wide to prevent them from filling up. I thought, what should I do? I have no money, no husband, poor health, and 2 girls. I have no way to start my struggle in the poor countryside. There are stupid men, ugly women, dirty cows, desolate mountains, and fields that are so ordinary that they can't be more ordinary. Everything is not what I need. Everything is not what I can tolerate, and I can't stay with them for long. I was particularly disgusted by Changma's fierceness. I didn't get her salary from me, and I couldn't control her. She knew all this, so she looked down on me. I couldn't tell my mother-in-law about this, or she might think it was my mother who instigated it. If she resigned from Kangma out of anger, things would be bad. How could I be responsible to find a good one for her? Because it's hard to say what's good or bad. There are only people who like it, but no one who does what they like. I laughed. I believed I should leave. One morning when my little daughter cried bitterly because she lost her milk, I made up my mind to leave. I admit that I am a coward, selfish, and perhaps the most cruel mother. I kissed my little daughter goodbye. She didn't even have a name yet, and she would never have one. She was taken away by Changma to be raised by her niece-in-law. She didn't give her milk, but fed her own child. She only gave me some rotten sweet potatoes to eat. She picked up the clothes, shoes and socks that my mother-in-law brought and put them on her own child. She cried and beat the ground, causing her to be sick for many years. I cheated her out of medical expenses, but didn't find her a doctor or take medicine. I didn't rush to the city to inform my parents-in-law until she was dying. Because of the inconvenience of transportation in Shanghai, my parents-in-law didn't tell us. They only gave us another sum of medical expenses and burial expenses. They threw my little daughter's body in the wild. I don't know if she was eaten by dogs or in the streets. But in short, I lost her forever. A life that just came out of the sound of gunfire, was tortured to death before the gunfire stopped. She only lived through 21 months of suffering. Why did she come and go so quickly? I also know that among the countless deaths and losses, she is naturally a very small one. But if she had grown up, maybe she would have been a peerless beauty, maybe a great genius, maybe a compassionate leader, maybe the most powerful, most capable, and most respected person. Who dares to say no? But she finally passed away. Xiantong and I were in Shanghai and didn't know about it. We were just planning how to make more money to buy milk and cod liver oil for her and give her the biggest doll to play with.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.